June 17th, 1943. The heat of an Oklahoma prisoner camp pressed down on the earth, the kind of heat that made the air shimmer like a veil of glass. Inside a crude wooden barrack, Feldwebel Dieter Kraus hunched over a scrap of paper, the stub of a pencil trembling in his calloused fingers. Each stroke was an act of defiance. He wrote not for his superiors, not for the Reich, but for himself. Words carved in secret, hidden beneath the floorboards of his bunk. Words so dangerous that discovery meant solitary confinement. Perhaps even a bullet. The diary was his last weapon, and in it he confessed what could not be spoken aloud. We have been deceived. They had been told America was soft, a mongrel nation, decadent, incapable of sustained war, a place of jazz and chaos, unfit to wage an industrial struggle against the Reich. Yet what Kraus saw on that sweltering day shattered every illusion carefully built by propaganda. From the barred window of a train rolling across unfamiliar land, he saw the impossible, an endless river of Sherman tanks. They glinted under the sun like a tide of olive-drab steel, their tracks clanking in rhythm, their stars painted with casual confidence. Not a handful, not a battalion, but countless, rolling one after another, as if poured from an unending mold. Kraus whispered to himself, "No nation with such abundance can ever be defeated." When the prisoners disembarked, silence accompanied their march. It was not the silence of discipline, but of men haunted. Dust rose from their boots, stinging eyes already raw from surrender. Then came the ripple, whispers that moved like wind through wheat, heads lifted, eyes widened. Beyond the fences, beyond the cranes creaking at the docks, another flood of Shermans came into view. The sight was unnatural, almost biblical in scale. The earth trembled, not from artillery, but from the steady heartbeat of industry. Some men muttered propaganda, others choked out impossible. But they knew, deep down, it was neither. It was truth, indifferent and merciless. For Kraus, memory split into before and after that moment. Before, Tunisia, where soldiers stripped bolts from the carcasses of burned-out panzers, welding at night, scavenging from wrecks, praying a single repaired gasket might carry them into battle. After, Norfolk, where cranes swung turrets into place with the gentleness of mothers placing teacups, where mechanics in clean coveralls moved between tanks with the calm efficiency of clerks stamping papers. In Germany, every machine was sacred, every part a treasure. Here in America, machines were not worshipped, they were replaced. A damaged tank was not a tragedy. It was simply another item in the endless ledger of production to be swapped out by morning. The sheer normality of it all was what broke the spirit. For Americans, convoys of tanks were not parades or propaganda. They were routine. Guards spoke casually of schedules. Dock workers laughed as they fueled machines. Teenagers, barely shaving, tossed clipboards to one another with the authority of seasoned officers. For German prisoners, the comparison was unbearable. In North Africa, entire divisions had fought with fewer than 60 panzers, each breakdown a disaster, each shell rationed like gold. In America, 60 tanks could be lost in an afternoon and replaced before dawn. The deeper they looked, the more their world collapsed. Liberty ships, vast floating factories, were launched in a week. Radar, technology whispered about like sacred treasure in Luftwaffe briefings, was mounted casually on cargo vessels. Trains that hauled tanks inland were air-conditioned, a luxury Germans believed reserved for Hitler himself. Even comfort was abundance. White bread with every meal, coffee that tasted fresh. Meat so plentiful, prisoners could not finish it. At first they believed it was a trick, a staged illusion designed to weaken resolve. But after days, then weeks of the same abundance, the truth sank in like a dagger. This was no illusion. This was America. It wasn't just the wealth of resources, but the casual waste that seared into their souls. Half-eaten steaks scraped into bins, loaves of bread tossed aside because they had gone slightly stale. Cigarettes smoked halfway and discarded without thought. To men who had fought over crusts of bread in Africa, it was not luxury, it was humiliation. It mocked every sacrifice they had made. As trains rolled westward, the revelations multiplied. From Virginia to Ohio, Kentucky to Michigan, the Germans saw landscapes that seemed endless. Smokestacks rose like forests. Rail yards stretched for miles. Entire towns existed only to feed factories larger than anything the Reich had ever built. Then came Detroit, the arsenal of democracy. Willow Run, where a new bomber rolled off the line every hour. The Detroit tank arsenal, where Shermans poured out like crops from fertile soil. Guards recited production numbers the way others recited weather, their pride casual, unforced. Krauss could barely hold his pencil steady as he scribbled in his diary. Every mile of track carries proof that what we were told was a lie. America is not weak. It is endless. The psychological collapse began not under fire, but in the minds of men staring out train windows. One officer muttered, "What we see is staged." Another, exhausted, answered, "Then they must have staged all of America." Silence followed. No one could answer. In the camps, the truth only deepened. Trains rumbled endlessly past fences, hauling fresh convoys of Shermans inland. Trucks delivered crates of parts as if they were sacks of grain. Guards smoked endlessly, their boots new, their uniforms clean, their tone casual. For Germans, who remembered scavenging tires, patching engines with wire, and mothers begging for coal, this abundance was not just strength, it was infinity. The breaking point for Krauss came one evening at Camp Hearn. A guard discarded a newspaper. On the front page, a photograph of Detroit's tank arsenal boasted thousands already produced. One line froze him. For every tank lost overseas, America builds 5 more. He stared until the words blurred. It was then he realized Germany could never win. It wasn't just a war of armies. It was a war of civilizations. Even after the war, prisoners carried that revelation home. They remembered not Stalingrad, not Tunisia, but Norfolk. Endless Shermans glinting under the Virginia sun, row after row without end. For them, that was the true moment of defeat. Not when the Reich surrendered in 1945, but when they first saw infinity roll past on steel tracks. Historians later uncovered dozens of such diaries. Officers confessed their faith cracked not under artillery, but at the sight of production without limit. The Reich had promised destiny. America had shown abundance. And abundance, more than firepower, was what decided the war. For men like Dieter Krauss, the truth burned eternal. They had not been defeated by soldiers alone, but by a nation whose factories, fields, and casual prosperity made war unwinnable. In their diaries, one sentence echoed again and again. "We were not fighting men. We were fighting infinity, and infinity cannot be conquered.